Good morning. January the 8th, Friday, January the 8th. I hope that you are well. I hope that everyone is doing good under the regulations and conditions that we have found ourselves in or that we have been placed in. And I have absolutely no idea what I was going to talk about this morning whatsoever. And for the first time actually, I felt a lot of resistance about coming into the water. I felt really resistant about it, and I said to Connor, I'm feeling really resistant about coming in this morning. And he said, well, it is -6 outside. He says, well, it is -6 outside. And maybe that's why I was a little bit resistant, but here we are, and totally speaking off the top of my head, really grateful. We've just had the first 1 week, 5 clients went through a 1 week coaching programme, which I facilitated, and it was an absolute joy. And I think the theme of the coaching was around about how we are using situations in our external world to keep us small and tight rather than light and expansive. And we might use projections that we have on people and events and situations in our world to keep us small and keep us stuck in perhaps a matrix rather than moving towards a vortex in some kind of way. And the river has a little bit of a bite in her this morning. It feels like I am being stung by 1,000 bees all the way down my back. So I'm trying to hold it together. Now, this was something that I was wanting to share that came up with a client a couple of days ago. Did we, Robin? Wow, that was incredible. This is a wee something that came up that gave me a lesson. It gave me an education a couple of days ago with a client, and it was around about alienation. So around about like being alienated from your children or a loss or a trauma. We could look at it in whatever way we will. But when, like, the majority of the work that I've done on myself and indeed in my profession has been around about addiction, working with addiction. And if someone, for an example, has started using drugs or alcohol, I let's just say age 13, age 15, there's no argument on it, and they become habitual users of a particular substance, and they use that substance until they're 40, and then they come into a world of recovery. There's an analogue that we use and that we look at, that the individual is stunted emotionally. Good morning, Mr. Schooler. That we are stunted emotionally at that age. So for an example, you start using drugs and alcohol at age 13, and then you get to age 30 and you decide to give up the drugs and the alcohol. Well, you've been emotionally stunted. So although you're like a man or a woman, you could be very childlike and emotionally reactive and very volatile, because there's a disharmony, if you like, of you need to play catch up. So when we're working with addiction and we're working with any of those kind of afflictions or trauma, there's a place where we stop developing, right? Now, I had never thought about this before until a couple of days ago, and the woman was talking about her son, and she had been alienated from her son. The son's age would have been, like, for an example, say 13. So that trauma that happened as the parents separate, or any trauma that we have, we become stunted. There's a place where if we've lost connection and we've broken bonding to ourselves, we're stunted in our emotional development, right? So that rung something really true for me, that I had an awareness around about myself that I had never thought about, right? 47-year-old, been in and around therapy since I was 21 years old, 27 years on this, and I had never thought about this myself before, right? And ironically, as the way the universe works, right, my godfather, my Uncle Peter, as I call him, phoned me this morning at 8:30. Don't know what he was phoning me at 8:30 for, and we ended up having this conversation, right, because I thought it was quite interesting. So I don't have any relationship with my father. I have very little relationship with my family, actually, to be honest, because it's not healthy for me. But one of the reasons I've not had a relationship with my dad is not because of him, but because of me, because I find myself giving my power away to him, and then I end up blaming him because I've given my power away to him, right? But really, that's not his fault, that's my fault. But anyway, my mother and father separated when I was 14. So I was thinking about this the other day there. I was like that, right, goodness. I said, I'm emotionally stunted at a 14-year-old around about the parent-son relationship. So anytime I gravitate towards any form of relationship with my dad, whether I'm 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever age I am, I'm immediately transported back to that broken 14-year-old. So then I interact. So there's one part of me is looking for something at 14-year-old, but I'm actually 40-year-old. And I had never thought about that before. And it was a real kind of epiphany for me. It was like a real awakening that there's a part of us we disconnect continually, right? So this takes us back. So we all come into the world, these wee innocent children, right? Just bundles of little joy, little bundles of love. And things happen through our life. We have traumatic experiences. We might lose a parent, we might lose a loved one, we might lose a sibling, we might lose a child, we might lose a friendship, we might lose a home, we might lose our business, we might lose our credibility, we might lose our social status, we might lose whatever we lose. And rather than dealing with the pain of that, we bury that pain inside us, right? And that pain, how many minutes have we been in for? 9 minutes. Super, right? How are you doing?
I'm alright.
Cool. Doing good?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry I've not spoke to you at all. Are you managing?
That's okay.
You managing?
Yeah.
You in it?
Super.
Cool. Right. So then when we start to respond in our environment, we're reacting to it not from a position of being like 48. If we become explosive, right, or we use anger to control, and we start to get angry because we've got this emotion that's going on inside us that's very vulnerable, and we don't know how to be with that emotion, what we do is we become very volatile, and we start kicking and screaming and throwing our toys out the pram. And the reason why we do that is we're trying to control the situation, we're trying to control the environment, we're trying to intimidate people in our world so that we don't feel that vulnerability, that level of vulnerability that's inside us, right? So, give me a second, man. -6. Feels like -6. Can't feel my hands, it's crazy, right? So, these are some of the awarenesses that I've just been having over the last couple of days. It's been a real eye-opener for me. Everybody all right?
Aye.
That's me playing daddy, making sure that everybody's all right. They're big enough themselves to look after themselves, I guess. So, where I'm going with this, right? So, are you reacting or responding to your environment? And if you're reacting to your environment, what age is the part of you that's reacting? Right? So like a child, when it has a tantrum, it's all this rage. But when an adult, when a big 6'2" guy has a tantrum, that's pretty scary, right? And what we then start to do is we start to drop into that personality, or we drop into that role. We drop into this to avoid feeling vulnerable, which is to avoid feeling the original heartbreak. Those of you that are still watching, I'm really, really sorry, but I've got no reception here. It would seem pretty clear and evident from the last few weeks of doing these vlogs that when I come out the water and I continue doing it out with the water, the screen froze. So, right. Oh, goodness. It's absolutely so cold. I'm so sorry if that was... I actually can't feel my hands. This is like the coldest I've felt it. So rather than feeling vulnerable, we become withdrawn. We use passive aggression. We become withdrawn. We withdraw from our environment. You doing all right? No, I'll wait for you. We'll wait for you. So cold, isn't it? Speaker. I don't even think I could grab the speaker. Oh, can't. Look. Hands are blue. Oh, God. Listen to me whinging like a wee girl. Oh, wow. Okay. Goodness, this morning's been a bit eventful, hasn't it? So, we come into the world very, very innocent, and we start to go through our journey, and things start to happen. We start to become traumatised. Where we become traumatised, we become disconnected. Where we become disconnected, that trauma, we become stunted. We become stunted in a certain stage in our development. And the only way that we can get a felt sense of connection through that disconnection is by using personalities and programs. When we use drugs, we get a felt sense of being connected. When we use alcohol, we get a felt sense of being connected. It's almost like we get a sense of power. We use intimidating or aggressive or hostile, or almost like we're in a fight. Like that kind of energy, that fighting energy. Or we put on a persona that we're very cold. I'm not approachable, don't come near me, stay away from me. As a defence mechanism to feel the fracture and the vulnerability of the place where we stepped away from ourselves because of an external trauma that happened to us. Is this making sense? So then, when we start to recover aspects of ourselves in a journey which you would call perhaps a homecoming, because we feel as if we're reconnecting to ourselves and it feels as if we're going home. Now, in 28 years, it'll be 28 years in April, I began my journey of recovery. And I've been working full time for 12 years as a psychotherapist, as a counsellor. And one of the themes which has been predominantly apparent in the work that we do with clients is the client wants to feel freedom, wants to feel there's this yearning in the mindset of the individuals that they want to feel connected, that they want to go back to that place. Now that place hasn't went anywhere. It's still in exactly the same place it's always been. Okay? So, I'm going to speak a wee bit metaphorically here, a wee bit not religiously, so don't hang up if you think I'm babbling on about religion. And I speak about this quite regularly. Right? The book of Genesis, when God put man into a deep sleep and created women, etc, 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 and then they disobeyed God and they ate the fruit from the forbidden tree. The second they ate the fruit from the forbidden tree, the first thing they did was cover their nakedness. They covered their nakedness because of shame and guilt. Okay, shame and guilt. Right, now this is just a story once upon a time, Jackanory land, right? But it's a story that's went about for thousands and thousands of years, and whether we like it or not, it's ingrained into the fibres of our DNA. Because even if your mummy didn't go to church, or your granny never went to church, your great-granny did, and your great-granny did, and your great-granny did. Because that book was force-fed into the earliest programming in our DNA, in our ancestral lineage, and it's in us, right? Whether we know it or not, that story is there within our culture. So what stopped us, what brought us out of the Garden of Eden is guilt. Guilt and shame. Guilt and shame work on the same neuroreceptor sites as heroin. The reason we can't inhabit the homeland, the place that we yearn and crave for so much, is because we're all intoxicated with guilt. We are all steaming out our nuts, stoned out our heads, flying off our tits on guilt, right? And as long as we're feeling guilt, we'll never, ever, ever feel the peace, the love and the serenity of the metaphorical garden that we all crave so deeply to get back with. And then what we do is we start, our unconscious mind and our ego has got us hooked because it doesn't want us to go back to harmony. It doesn't want us to go back to our hearts. And what it does is we start to create situations in our world where we feel more guilt. So we go out and we have an argument, or we have a child with somebody, and then we split up, and then, you know, all of the things that we're creating in our environment is so that we get to feel continual shame. And as long as we're feeling continual shame, we will never, ever, ever be able to make the journey back to the garden. So the garden has never went anywhere. It's in exactly the same place it's always been, but we'll never see it as long as we're feeling guilt. So why don't we look at it a little bit differently and stop trying to make our way back to the garden that we'll never ever get to as long as we're intoxicated with guilt, and start to let ourselves off the hook. Start to let ourselves off the hook for the guilt that we feel. Take ourselves down off the crucifix. Accept that we've made a mistake. Accept that we've messed up. Accept that life hasn't turned out perhaps the way that our heart wants it to. But from today we've got a choice that we can see ourselves through a different lens and a different narrative. So, I hope that that has made sense. Thank you very much for bearing with my lack of reception that I have down here. And have a blessed Friday. See you, Connor. Have a fantastic Friday, everybody. And I wish you all a really great day. All the best, all the love, all the power.